Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on behalf of Women in Renewable Energy and from our partner, the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network. We welcome you to Renewable Energy in Remote Areas, Opportunity for Clean Energy in the Arctic. I'm Jasmine Lynn, a member of WIRE's Advisory Committee Board and co-lead of the International Committee. Today, we will start with a message from the Governor General of Canada, followed by an introduction to WIRE. Then I'll hand it over to Embla from the IACN, who will introduce the chair of today's session, David Hick. After each speaker's presentation, we will go back to David, who will lead the Q&A. To ask a question, please use the chat box, which can be found in the lower part of your screen. And now, a message from the Governor General, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon. The Arctic is one of the most unique places on the planet, and also a well-lived and lived-in home for Inuit, First Nations, and Métis people. Growing up, my parents and grandmother taught us the traditional ways of the Inuit, how to live off the land, and how to travel by dog sled and boat. That traditional way of life is now in peril. Climate change is warming the Arctic faster than almost anywhere else on the planet. The Arctic represents nearly 40% of our landmass and may be free of summer sea ice in the coming decades. How we address this challenge will define our generation, which is why I'm heartened by the efforts so many of you have been making to champion renewable and clean energy in the Arctic. Your innovative and creative ideas are not only welcome, they are necessary. I thank you for gathering to raise this vital issue impacting Canada and other Arctic nations. I wish all of you an enlightening discussion. Mary Simon. And now I'm happy to introduce you all to Women in Renewable Energy, or WIRE for short. WIRE is a global nonprofit, and our purpose is to advance the role and recognition of women in the energy sector. Our organization was launched and incorporated in Toronto, Canada in 2013. We work towards our purpose through our programming offered to professionals and students of all genders, which includes networking meetups, capacity building field trips, workshops, and speed mentoring. We also organize bursaries for post-secondary students and offer a student ambassadorship program. We share stories from women leaders through our blog, and we run several Women of Distinction Awards. We are also working to connect with Indigenous communities across Canada. With the COVID-19 pandemic, as much as we can, we are taking our events virtual instead of in person. WIRE has chapters across Canada, from Vancouver to St. John's, and also in the Yukon. We've also been expanding internationally with chapters in Turkey, Georgia, Jordan, Azerbaijan, the UAE, Africa, and Iceland through our partnership with IACN. WIRE's leadership team is made up of our president and CEO, Joanna Osawe, and our executive board members, Aisha Bukhari and Julia Cushing. They bring their backgrounds in energy, innovation, and the environment together to advance the role and recognition of women in the energy sector. Here, I'd like to share with you some of the values and initiatives that WIRE supports and follows. One being the idea of local, think global and act local. While we have chapters spread across Canada and the globe, we try to take a local lens to understand the needs of women in the energy sector on the ground to deliver our programming to be the most impactful it can be. We are a supporter of the Leadership Accord on Gender Diversity from Electricity Human Resources Canada, with our public commitment to promote the values of workplace diversity and inclusion. Another initiative we support is Equal by 30. This is a public commitment for concrete action towards equal pay, equal leadership, and equal opportunities for women in the clean energy sector by 2030, and to ultimately close the gender gap. Now we'd like to recognize and give a big thank you to our government partners for their support, as well as our major sponsors from the WIRE Gigawatt Club. Our additional sponsors in Canada, our industry partners and educational partners, and last but not least, our international partners. WIRE hosts events throughout the year. You can learn more about them on our website. These events are open to everyone in Canada and internationally. Finally, I'd like to invite you to check out our website, womeninrenewableenergy.ca, for further information on everything we do and to keep in touch with us online. You can also follow us on our social media platforms. Thank you, everyone, and I will now pass the mic to Embla.
Thank you, Jasmine. It is a pleasure to work with you guys on the webinar series. Greetings to you all. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. It's a pleasure to be with you here today at the launch of this first webinar series on the Share Your North webinar platform. My name is Embla, and I'm the director of the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network. The network mission is to initiate, encourage, and facilitate Icelandic and international cooperation on Arctic issues, including research, education, innovation, and monitoring amongst public and private organizations, institutions, businesses, and bodies involved in Arctic issues. The network fulfills its goal by facilitating access to information concerning Arctic-related activities, providing support, guidance, and consultation for cooperation on Arctic issues within Iceland, and by participating in domestic and international projects. We're involved in several projects, but these days the most prominent is the Arctic Council Sustainable Development Working Group project on gender equality in the Arctic, which we led and collaborate on with many international partners. This was an Arctic Council chairmanship project during Iceland's chairmanship of the Arctic Council in 2019 to 2021. For further information on the project and its recently published report, please see the link provided in the chat. The Share Your North platform is a platform that the network has developed with the University of Akureyri and will offer lectures, conversations, and interviews on life and development in the Arctic. The first series of events hosted by Share Your North is Renewable Energy for Sustainable and Inclusive Development in the Arctic series, developed with Women in Renewable Energy, or WIRE, but in collaboration with the Icelandic Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Embassy of Canada to Iceland, the Embassy of Iceland to Canada, the Northeast Iceland Regional Development Agency, the Directorate of Equality, and Electricity Human Resources Canada. I will keep it short today, leave it at that, and now give the floor to our excellent chair, David Hick. Thank you.
Thank you, Embla, and welcome everyone to this this webinar. I think it's going to be a very interesting hour and a half. My name is David Hick. I'm the Chief Scientist with Polar Knowledge Canada, and I'm based in Cambridge Bay in Nunavut at the Canadian High Arctic Research Station. One of the core areas of research supported by Polar Knowledge Canada is the development of new solutions for sustainable energy. It's one of the areas that we support in a number of communities in Northern Canada. So we're very interested in the discussion today and some of the experiences that others have had in reaching these goals. Before we start with the presentations, I would like to first invite some opening remarks from the Ambassador of Canada to Iceland and from the Ambassador of Iceland to Canada. Did I get that right? Yes. So first of all, Ambassador Jeannette Menzies, if I could invite you to say a few words, please.
Thanks, David. Nice to see you. And I believe I'm actually speaking here on behalf of both of our ambassadors, since we both, I'm not speaking on behalf of Iceland, of course, but I'm here on behalf of both myself and Ambassador Tonje Johansen from Iceland. So my name is Jeannette Menzies, and I'm the Canadian ambassador to Iceland. I have been here since January of 2020. I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you so much to the organizers for inviting us to be part of this. It's a really exciting initiative, and I can see with looking at the speakers, it'll be a fruitful discussion. So obviously, I want to simply highlight, I won't repeat what's been said before, but I want to thank you for reaching out and getting that opening remark from the Governor General, Mary Simon. I actually spent a bit of time this morning reading through the Governor General's speech from the throne that was delivered yesterday. For those of you that follow Canadian politics, this was our Governor General, Mary Simon's first speech from the throne. She read the speech in 3 languages, in French, English, and Inuktitut. And this makes it the first time that any part of the speech from the throne was delivered in a language other than Canada's 2 official languages. So that's quite a historic moment. A few highlights that I took away reading the speech that apply to our conversation today is one of the points is about Canada continuing to work with key allies and partners and making deliberate efforts to deepen partnerships, including across the Arctic. So obviously this falls into that category. Another line that I grabbed hold of is that this is the moment for bolder climate action. Building a resilient economy means investing in people, but the work does not stop there. After all, growing the economy and protecting the environment go hand in hand. By focusing on innovation and good green jobs, and by working with like-minded countries, we will build a more resilient, sustainable, and competitive economy. The third point I wanted to flag is the point about diversity and inclusion. Certainly both Canada and Iceland recognize the need to be inclusive and have diverse perspectives and involve people when we plan and implement energy needs in the Arctic. Progress has been made with initiatives to date, which we might hear from throughout the conversation today in the energy sectors. But there's of course always more we can be doing. Specifically in Northern Canada and in the Canadian context, this is all about involving Northerners and Indigenous people in all stages of the process, be it the policymaking phase, the design phase, as well as implementation. And also, as mentioned in the speech from the throne, reconciliation requires a whole of government approach, breaking down barriers and rethinking how to accelerate our work. I want to make a quick note that I know I say this as my colleague in Ottawa, the Icelandic ambassador, we both keep mentioning this whenever we have the opportunity, but 2022 marks the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Canada and Iceland. And I think this series really cuts across many of the priority areas that we both wish to advance. So I am really excited to be part of this series. The title of today's series is, of course, or the title of the series is Renewable Energy for Sustainable and Inclusive Development in the Arctic. The first session today is on remote and Indigenous communities. The second one is on the role of women in the clean energy transition in the North. The third is looking at policies that support or obstruct renewable energy growth. And then finally, looking at feasibility of going completely renewable. And I suspect this one will really explore the possibilities around technologies and innovation that we need to adapt into our northern energy activities. So I think I'll leave it there. David, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of the government of Canada. And I look forward to being part of the conversation today and in future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannette, for that introduction. I know working with both you and Ambassador Guðmundur Johansen, there's lots of opportunities for more collaboration between both Canada and Iceland. And of course, the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations has really opened the door to much more of an active conversation about what those could look like in the future. Okay, so today we have 6 presentations, 6 speakers. And when that is completed, they'll each speak for about 5 minutes on a number of different topics. And when that's finished, we'll open this up for the Q&A. And as you heard at the outset, please, if you have questions, just start to put them into the chat and we'll keep track of those and try to address as many as we can at the end of the presentations. So to kick us off, I'd like to welcome Clarence Synard. Clarence is the president and CEO of NCC Investments, and he'll speak about highlighting the technical and physical challenges of constructing energy infrastructure in remote communities in Canada. And for all speakers, I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more directly. So over to you, Clarence.
Thank you, Mr. Hick. And I just want to tell you, it's a pleasure being here today to be able to speak on behalf of Nunavut. And I spend a lot of time in Cambridge Bay, at least 6 trips a year. So I certainly make sure that when I make my way over there in the new year, I'll reach out to you and we can meet in person. My name is Clarence Synard. I'm president and CEO of NCC Investment Group. We're 100% Inuit-owned organization, and we're based in Iqaluit. And our ownership group spans across the entire territory. And our company was set up basically at the time, to design, build, and maintain a lot of the required infrastructure for when Nunavut became a territory in 1999. Clean energy is something that's very important to not only our organization, but it's important to our ownership group as well. And certainly, you know, as much as we want to promote and execute clean energy, it comes with its distinct challenges. And I'm going to highlight some of those for you today. And just to put it in perspective, we have 25 communities in Nunavut. Nunavut is about 20% of Canada's land mass. And every one of those communities are fly in, fly out. We have no direct road links to any other areas of southern Canada, nor do we have any links to other communities other than, you know, snowmobile, boat, or by airplane. So as you can imagine, it's quite challenging in the environment we're in and with the span that we have of our geography. So I just want to highlight some technical and physical challenges. You know, for power generation, we have isolated electrical grids that require stability, reliability, and cost effectiveness. Traditional diesel generation is familiar, and any installation of any new technologies requires extensive training for the operators. Many renewable energy technologies are not Arctic rated. Previous technologies have failed in Nunavut as a result of inadequate manufacturing that didn't take into account the Arctic conditions. But technologies have vastly matured over the last decade, with direct drive turbines, heating blades, etc., being favored for Arctic projects. Solar PV has also been proven in Nunavut for over a decade and has had a significant uptake in recent years as the price for installations have fallen, as well as the price for equipment. Some areas of Nunavut actually, and a lot of people don't know this, but some areas of Nunavut actually have a better solar resource than many southern jurisdictions, such as Nova Scotia. Because while solar PV does not generate electricity once the sun sets in the winter months, it generates constantly in the summer months when the sun does not set and we're in a 24-hour daylight period. So therefore, when looked at an annual basis, the energy production through solar PV in the Arctic is comparable with southern jurisdictions. Given the remote nature of communities and isolated electrical grids, dispatchable energy is necessary when intermittent resources are not available. Backup diesel generators are necessary for emergency preparedness, though they do not need to be 100% of the prime power generation in the territory. Batteries and other energy source systems help to mitigate the intermittency of renewable resources, though long duration energy storage, such as hydrogen, is still relatively new, and it's also expensive for Arctic applications. Batteries and flywheels can be useful for hours and minutes energy storage, but if there ever were a days-long period with little to no renewable energy generation, backup diesel generators would still be required, unless long duration energy storage such as hydrogen becomes more readily available commercially. Site selection for renewable energy generation can be difficult. Best resource availability for certain types of technologies can be located lengthy distances from the communities. Again, another challenge. Installation of lengthy transmission lines are cost prohibitive. Local distributed energy resources such as community solar, wind, and energy storage, etc., are the most cost-effective options for installing renewable energy generation equipment. Integration into the existing electrical distribution networks requires extensive collaboration between project proponents and the utility, especially for high penetration projects. Both entities need to be transparent and open to finding solutions to integrate renewables that best suit each of the community's priorities. I just want to highlight some larger projects that are underway in Nunavut. QEC, our energy provider, is planning a hybrid diesel solar PV power plant in Qvist. Inuit-owned land, clean energy microgrid in Iqaluit, clean energy microgrid in Arviat, wind and battery energy storage project in Senekiluaq, and the Qvist hydro line in the Qvist region. But here's one big challenge. We have the technologies there, but the policy isn't. And I just want to finish up my discussion here, just touching on that. There's three policies that are in place through Kulik Energy Corporation to enable renewable energy development in the territory. Net metering. The net metering is good. This is targeted at residential customers or small office buildings with an installed capacity capped at 10 kilowatts. This allows residential customers and one municipal customer per community to offset their electricity bills through self-generation. Commercial and institutional power producer program is bad. This is targeted at existing commercial and institutional customers, likely for mostly for rooftop solar generation. Instead of offsetting electricity bills through self-generation, the SIP program requires commercial users to sell every kilowatt of electricity they generate themselves to the Power Corp at a rate of 25 cents per kilowatt hour. Then the user must purchase electricity back from the utility for use in the customer's facility at the community rate. So just to put that in perspective, you produce your own power, you sell it to the grid, they pay you 25 cents per kilowatt hour and a kilowatt, you buy it back for 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's just unbelievable. Go further north to a community like Grímsey, you buy it back at $1.07 per kilowatt hour. Pricing under this program is not negotiable, nor are the terms of the power purchase agreement. This would be applicable to large community scale initiatives, though the program is not available, and the lack of an IPP policy availability is causing major delays for a number of community scale initiatives, including the 10 kilowatt wind project and the Arviat microgrid project. So we're really restricted right now by policy, and one of the ways that I've tried to inflict some positive change on that was earlier this spring, the Kulik Energy Corp put out a call for directors. So I threw my name into the mix, and I was appointed by our minister to join that board, and we actually had our first board meeting last week, and I'm certainly hoping that I'm able to be a voice from the private sector that's really pushing these renewable energy initiatives, because we certainly feel the effects of climate change throughout our territory, and we realize the importance of it. And it's just really sad right now that it's policy that's blocking it, not technology. So thank you, and my apologies, David. I know I went a little bit over, but thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much, Clarence. Really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon in Cambridge Bay. I will turn now to Jennifer Spence. Jennifer is the Executive Secretary of the Sustainable Development Working Group of the Arctic Council. And Jennifer will be speaking about development and overcoming remoteness for Arctic communities, addressing energy issues within the context of the Arctic Council. Jennifer.
Great. Thanks very much, David. So fabulous to follow Clarence. I think he's raised so many incredibly important issues. So I will do my best to sort of complement that. The Arctic Council obviously works with all of the Arctic states, but really the Sustainable Development Working Group takes a very focused approach with working with communities and a community-driven approach to our work. And what's great about this event, I just want to emphasize, is this event really brings together two things that are incredibly important to the Sustainable Development Working Group. One being gender equality, and the other being energy. So I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak here. One of the areas that we do a lot of work is around enabling infrastructure, and we have quite a suite of initiatives that take place related to energy and sustainability in particular. But I think what I wanted to focus on here is really to emphasize sort of focusing on why do we want energy sustainability in the Arctic, and how that really drives the work that the SDWG tries to do in this area. So and I mean that Clarence really touched on a lot of these. I mean, we can talk about the technical elements of this, about reducing diesel dependency and energy affordability. Those are sort of obvious ways that it's important to remote communities in the Arctic. But you can take it another step further, and you can talk about how critical energy is as enabling infrastructure to the thriving communities in the Arctic. So then you actually get to start talking about what is adequate infrastructure in the Arctic, and what do communities actually need, and then you actually have to talk about energy sovereignty and the importance of communities having the ability to make their own decisions about their energy needs, and then you can extend it out, that the relationship or the need for sustainable energy, it fits into food security, it fits into the health and well-being of communities. And so we really try to focus on, why are we doing these initiatives? Why are they important to remote Arctic communities? With that in mind, again, the SCWG has done a suite of work in this area, and it really is an area that we've done a lot of work. And so sort of touching on how this idea of why we do this work has driven, influences the type of work that we do. So we focus a lot on building capacity within communities in the North specifically. We've developed toolkits for community planning around energy. We bring together, we have an academy specifically that works on energy building, sort of mentoring and building together individuals who are community members that are interested in demonstration projects and learning across the Arctic. So how can we share that knowledge from one community to another? But we also sort of work on sort of the capacity development in terms of making sure that capacity development is sustained and in the communities themselves, and it's not outsourced experience and expertise, which I think is incredibly important. We also have information and exchange and sharing of data about where there's renewable energy. So hopefully coming to this issue of where there's a need for a better enabling policy environment, what kind of information are we providing to different jurisdictions, whether they be national governments or local governments or territorial governments? What type of information do policymakers need to inform their decision making? And I think that this is an area that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So building those networks of policymakers to make good decisions, and also doing the research that enables policymakers to sort of understand the unique context in the Arctic. And ultimately, I would say that my final message before I close is really to say that at the end of the day, when we sort of measure the success of the work of the Arctic Council and the SCWG related to energy, our focus is on community-driven solutions. What is it that communities need to be supported in their energy needs, but recognizing that energy is also a fundamental piece of the infrastructure that is needed for a broad array of social, economic, and cultural needs of communities, and keeping that in mind when we do our work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. The work of the SDWG is always impressive, and I think I mean, both you and Clarence remind us that it's not just innovation in technology that's important, but it's innovation in policy and how we translate the new opportunities that technology provides into something that's sustainable and affordable in Arctic communities. Our next speaker is Mats Frederiksen, the director of the Arctic Economic Council. Mats joins us from Moscow today, and he'll be speaking about renewable energy in remote areas and a little bit about the financing mechanisms and frameworks for remote communities to be able to implement new technology. So, Mats.
Thank you very much, David. And yeah, my name is Mats Frederiksen and sit in Moscow, but normally I'm based out of Tromsø from the Arctic Economic Council. And I think that kind of symbolizes what kind of organization we are. We are the only independent business organization covering the whole Arctic region. So I will speak from a more broader perspective rather than just the North American Arctic. One thing we do have in common across the Arctic region is climate change. The temperatures are increasing at 3 times the speed of the world average in the Arctic region. And my members, the companies, some of the first to feel this change. You know, first of all, because they go to very remote areas, they do shipping or they do constructing of crucial and critical infrastructure. like making sure energy is delivered to remote places, but also because infrastructures is hit by melting permafrost. So companies are definitely feeling this, and I also think a lot of the solutions has to come from companies. I would like to first start up with a small story that probably many of you have already heard about, but there was a historic moment a few months ago when a tiny isolated village of Old Row in Canada experienced complete silence for the first time since the 1970s. And why was this? Yeah, but the reason why they experienced this complete silence was because this small indigenous community in Yukon for many years had diesel power generators to meet their electricity needs. And now, together with one of our members of the Arctic Economic Council, ATCO, this community 120 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle now has its own solar energy microgrid. So 2,160 panels that they can use during the Arctic summer sun. And then they have a battery storage system, 616 kilowatt battery energy storage system, and a microgrid controller. So now it means that they are reducing the use of diesel generators by 2,000 hours, or around 189 liters of diesel fuel annually. So I think that's quite an impressive story. And a little bit about the AEC and just a little bit of disclosure. So the AEC is represented by companies and indigenous groups like the ICC and the Aleuts and Raypon and Athabascans. And we got members both in the oil and gas sectors, but also, and for the record, also indigenous groups investing in oil and gas. But we also have a lot of companies from the renewable energy sector. So one of our members from Norway is the biggest renewable energy company in Norway, Tromskraft, that is building both wind and hydro. And a key point here is that even though it's privately operated, Tromskraft is owned by the municipality, and we heard that from the previous speakers, that quite often there's an overlap between the public and the private sector. Another example is there's the Greenlandic government. They recently announced an investment of $360 million to upgrade their hydropower plant. So that will be public money, but they are also looking to add on for private investors to go in and invest in power to X or ammonia production in Greenland. So I just want to say that it's all mixed up when we talk about investments and funding. And I just want to highlight what Jennifer was also mentioning, that this energy we talk about and infrastructure development, because normally when you construct energy infrastructures, you also construct all kind of other supporting infrastructures. And this sustainable economic development and the resilience of the local Arctic communities are two sides of the same coin. I mean, it really goes hand in hand together. Many remote communities are reliant on truck water delivery, for example. Sometimes with energy projects, you suddenly have some energy infrastructures. We heard from Clarence about some of the conditions that investors are working in when they look at the Arctic. And now thinking about outside investors, we have this vast landscape. We maybe have permafrost, which makes it difficult to put a wind turbine. We have weather conditions that can be extreme, high winds, sub-zero temperatures, extended period of darkness. We have, which is a major point here, a low density of population, which means the economy of scale is sometimes difficult. You have ethnographic diversity. We obviously need to talk with all the inputs of the locals and thinking like how the communities connect with each other. I think that's the main point for when you talk about these investments. Don't look at them just, one there and one there, because then the economy of scale will not be there. You have to look at the bigger picture, but at the same time, like in Greenland, there's no roads between the cities, like we heard about Nunavut. Then you have other parts of the Arctic, like primarily the Northern Arctic, where there's a lot of roads and airports and good infrastructures. Then you have regulations and permitting that can vary a lot. Especially permitting processes for large-scale projects that has to pass through a mix of both public and private lands, and this really add on to the capex and opex. So how do we cope with all of this? How do we cope with these challenging conditions for investments, this economy of scales, especially in smaller communities? And I think, you can basically look at it three ways. Either you have completely private investments, complete public investments, so you have public-private partnerships. And for these remote energy projects, it's really public-private partnerships that's the way forward. The AEC recently published a report on connectivity where we went through the various projects, and I will tell you to go on the AEC website and read through that. So we go through, design, build, and grant, tax incentives, operation subsidies, design, build, and operate, support, or maybe even long-term purchasing agreements. So there's all these various funding models, and all of these models can be found in our connectivity report. The same go for energy, but it's basically, about lowering risk. And then my last minute here, I just want to talk a little bit about the future of investments and how I see the Arctic energy market is going, because here we are talking about smaller remote communities, and I really, really think that we have to think outside the box. We have to aim higher than just getting rid of the diesel generators. So most of the Arctic region don't really have energy grids that are ready for exports. But if you take a city like Berlevåg, or a town like Berlevåg in North Norway, has less than 900 people populated, they said they had unlimited amount of wind. The wind is basically blowing 24/7 at a high speed, so they're putting up wind turbines now. And suddenly they're starting getting a lot of investments into wind turbines, even though they cannot export the energy. So why is that? That's because they are building a power-to-X, or ammonia production. And everyone sees the future of shipping has to be green, and the future of shipping has to have energy. So remote communities can suddenly give ammonia. The same in northern Sweden. You have Northvolt, a battery factory that is using the energy to make batteries locally and then exporting them. And then finally, and my very last comment is that in the Faroe Islands, they're also doing research into tidal energy. So it's a whole new energy form that we haven't mentioned yet. So we also need research funding into this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mats. That's a really interesting perspective that the Arctic Economic Council has brought to this conversation, connecting the various financing mechanisms with the solutions. We all want the same outcome, but the path to get there is going to be different in different countries, different communities, and different regions. And this is a very nice segue, I think, to our next presentation by Guðmundur Sigurðarson, the general manager of Vistorka, which is based in Akureyri. He'll tell you more about this, but he'll be speaking about energy transitions in Grímsey in North Iceland. So there you are. Okay, I see you on the screen. Over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. 12 years ago, Grímsey, which is a small island to the north of Iceland, became part of the Akureyri municipality. Grímsey, with a population of around 40 people, lies on the Arctic Circle. Small island, but they're not connected to the main energy grid in Iceland. So Vistorka, where I work, is a part of the municipality. We are linked to the utility company, the energy company in the area. And I want to tell you about the hurdles and how difficult it has been to actually put words into action in Grímsey. Vistorka, we try to implement and install already known and approved technology where we can. Biodiesel plant in Akureyri, methane plant, and things like that. We're not doing research or and things like that. So in Grímsey, what is the driving force? How can we go from oil? Because all energy in Grímsey is today produced with oil. Diesel oil with 3 diesel generators, electricity and heating. Heating just with a tank next to the house for heating. So how do we go from burning 500,000 liters of diesel in Grímsey? How do we remove that? So there are so many players that are involved in, of course, the people living there, the local authorities, the Icelandic government, because the people living in Grímsey, they pay almost the same price as everybody else in Iceland for energy. That means the government is subsidizing the energy, the production. So this is a very, very complicated case. But so I'm not saying that Vistorka and the energy agency in Iceland, we pushed this very hard. So I'm not saying that because we exist, this is happening. But what I'm saying is that it takes a lot of energy and a lot of work and a lot of pushing to get things from words to action and actually doing something. Because it's so easy to just get the oil tanks and the oil from and just burn it and everybody gets electricity and heating. So to change that, we actually have to do something. We have to install windmills, we have to install solar panels, we have to change the windows, we have to add the insulation to the roofs, we have to change to LED light bulbs, we have to look at other options like is there a possibility of geothermal heating? So this is what we're doing now. We're actually, as we speak, we are installing 2 6-kilowatt windmills in Grímsey that will produce around 10% of the total electricity need in the island. We're installing 12 kilowatts of solar panels, and we will install a battery as well from 2 old Nissan Leaf cars. So this will be a very, very interesting energy mix. Off the grid town, so with sustainable green energy. That was my talk today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think the experience you have in Grímsey, well, you know, throughout all northern Iceland and up and down Eyjafjörður, it's the even within a small region, very different solutions for different communities. Yes. Yeah, thank you. So our next presentation presenter is Eryn Stewart. Eryn is Director of Indigenous Clean Energy Canada, and she'll be speaking about Indigenous perspectives and opportunities for renewable energy in remote communities. And I'll turn it over to you, Eryn. You're still muted, Eryn. I can see you on the shared screen now, but I can't hear you. Apologies. While we're sorting out transferring Eryn onto the screen, we could move to the next presentation. Eryn, do you want to try just one more time, and otherwise we'll just pause transferring and move your presentation to the end? I can't hear you. Okay, Jasmine, I think we'll move to the next presentation just until we sort this out. Is that okay?
Yes, that's a good idea, David.
Okay, thanks. So I'd like to invite Tonje Johansen from the Saami Council to join us, and she'll be talking about green colonialism, global sustainable development, and climate change, and some of the impacts and realities that Indigenous peoples face in the Arctic.
Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting the Saami Council to speak at this event. We know that the Saami people's energy situation is quite different from other Indigenous peoples in the Arctic. We are mostly connected to the national grid, and therefore most of our communities are not dependent on fossil fuels for energy, such as diesel. However, we are constantly experiencing high pressure from the majority society to build so-called green energy on our land areas, leaving us on a constant battle against land grabbing, because green energy projects, in particular wind energy projects, are so land area demanding that our traditional ways of life and use of nature are under severe threat. Wind energy projects in the Arctic does actually mean that the land is not safe to travel in most of the year due to the risk of ice being thrown from the wind turbines. It is actually life-threatening for both humans and animals. So our lands become inaccessible. And let's not even talk about the loss of biodiversity and the actual pollution that comes from the infrastructures these projects demands. And they seem to become just bigger and bigger for each project proposed on our land areas, both in numbers and in height. We do understand the wish from other Indigenous societies to transform from diesel to less pollutive energy sources, and we support their position on this, though we hope that other Indigenous societies do not end up like we have, where we have to take case after case to courts in order to try to secure our Indigenous rights. We did actually finally have one win and recognition of our rights recently in Norway in the Supreme Court. An already built wind energy project has been ruled to be illegal and in violation of reindeer herders' Indigenous rights. The wind turbines were built on the reindeer herders' last but most important winter grazing land, effectively forcing the reindeer herders out of the land areas, and it is no longer usable for them. This means that several of them have to quit because there are no winter grazing land left for the animals. And this is Europe's currently biggest wind energy projects with 80 turbines, but we do have bigger projects proposed on our land areas elsewhere. And I cannot see that this pressure will become any less in the future. And these projects are not built to serve our society's needs, and neither are they built with proper consultation and consent from us. They actually serve as a modern way of colonialism. The majority society often talks to us about how it is now our turn to contribute to stopping climate change, and that we must not be in the way for the greater good. Yes, we do hear constantly that we are in the way for development and modernization, but we are the ones that feel the climate change strongest on our bodies. We are the ones paying the price for the majority society's consumption party and taking our land, arguing that this is for our own best so that we can halt climate change. That is not justice. The constant pressure now on our lands are harming my society. It is harming our youth and is stealing our human resources. Some of us has been going in and out of the court system since the 80s to battle, to fight for their land areas. And when one battle is settled, a new one appears, and the battles often entail loss. Our energy and resources are forced into trying to preserve what little are left of our land and fighting for our mere existence. This leaves an enormous pressure on our people's economy, because it's not cheap to go to court and it's not economical, sustainable to lose grazing land every year. And it's taking a toll on our mental health. Our youth are feeling distressed and unsure about the future, not knowing if they will be able to live as reindeer herders and not knowing if the time and money they have invested in reindeers will ever be enough. And a constant conflict with the majority society also ignites discrimination and racism towards us. A life in constant fight mode does not give much room for developing our society on our own terms and in a direction that we want. Energy production on Indigenous land need to be based on Indigenous peoples' society's needs for energy consumption, not the majority society's industry projects. It needs to be Indigenous-led projects where they're serving our needs. A rushed transition to green energy sources without proper mechanisms for free, prior, and informed consent is not sustainable, and it will lead to the violation of Indigenous rights. So the Saami Council's position is that this has to be in place before any projects are developed on Indigenous lands. So in order to secure that other Indigenous societies does not end up where we are, using almost all of our human resources, just trying to secure a future for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonje. I think this is a very important part of the conversation as well. The societal and cultural costs of energy transformation are not always considered as important as other aspects of the work that's being done, and really the primacy of self-determination for the types of projects that are developed, especially at a local scale, is something that we need to think an awful lot about, more than we have perhaps. I think, Eryn, that your internet has returned, and so I'll introduce you again, Eryn Stewart, the Director of Indigenous Clean Energy Canada. Eryn.
Eryn, sorry, you're muted still.
I was just saying thank you and sorry, everyone. It just goes to show the importance of reliable and stable internet in remote regions. And Tonje, I just wanted to hit home for me and really thinking about that, and the, consultation, FPIC, as there's strong Indigenous leadership on those projects. And that it is fully backed by the community and the Q. We are an Indigenous government nationwide in
Eryn, you might try turning off your video. You might try turning off your video. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Is that any better?
That's an improvement, at least for me. So let's see how that works.
Okay. Inclusion on clean energy economy through tangible projects and ventures that are Indigenous led. And we operate a number of programs that facilitate capacity building around renewable energy project development. Yeah, it's unstable. I don't think I'm.
No, you're good. You're good. We can hear you well. We can hear you well. Go ahead.
All right. Around renewable energy project, efficient housing, online collaboration, and specifically around advancing Indigenous youth careers in the energy sector. And, Mads mentioned earlier around Old Crow First Nation, Chief Data Tizia Tram, who was really a catalyst for that project, is actually part of our network and has gone through our capacity building and is sharing. And it's this idea of sharing best practices and learns and peer-to-peer mentoring, that it's really important to understand the energy landscape or the energy baselines, the supply and demand mix of a community to be able to foster clean energy development. And this is really grounded in community-led community energy planning. And so in partnership with the Sustainable Development Working Group at the Arctic Council, Gwich'in Council International, we developed the Arctic Community Energy Planning Toolkit, and it covered a number of case study and best practices across the circumpolar Arctic that focused on community-led energy planning initiative and project development. And with this, we also paired it with energy education about how are we educating youth in community and community members and elders around energy transition, just energy transition, equitable energy transition. And through this work, we've now gone and developed what is called the Indigenous Off-Diesel Initiative. So we're actually working now with 6 communities in Nunavut, so Joe Haven, Rankin Inlet, Coral Harbor, Nauyat, Cougaruk, and Baker Lake, as well as 3 communities in the Northwest Territories, Fort McPherson, Delaney, and Inuvik, and in Northern Quebec and in Nunavik, in Kuujjuaq, in Nunatukavut, as well as Nunatsiavut. And each of these communities are actually receiving $2.1 million each, which is amazing. And they're doing this through grants through our federal government, where they are building their own energy plans that are built on Indigenous sovereignty and energy security, and now actually going and implementing projects. And so ICE, Indigenous Clean Energy, is the lead capacity building body that's supporting these champions through the program, through our programming. And we're also working with the Pembina Institute that is really focused on energy policy. So, you know, Clarence mentioned a little bit earlier about the IPP policy here. And, you know, 25 cents is just not enough. It's non-competitive in Nunavut, the pricing, and it's really non-negotiable. And what we see is this policy is really lacking on several statements that don't really align with QEC, the need for a long-term approach that prioritizes and maximizes the benefit of moving to renewable energy and decreasing QEC's dependency on diesel fuel, all while still providing safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. But if we're looking at the PPA rate that's being offered to increase it, it's suggested that it's, you know, 25 cents per kilowatt hour. But we need to be looking at this at a much higher rate in order for communities in terms of these renewable energy rate beyond marginal cost of diesel energy. It's really not taking into the true cost of diesel. You know, Tonje mentioned about the environmental concerns and the livelihood. None of these are being factored into the rates, allowing communities to fully take advantage of renewable assets in Nunavut. Being done through the Department of Environment and Climate Change Secretariat at the Government of Nunavut, which is offering these one-time grants of up to $5,000 to install solar wind power systems in communities. You know, these are being done on a case-by-case basis, which is phenomenal. And we're actually developing a video. It's just in its final development that'll be in Inuktitut with English translations about these off-grid solar projects and how, you know, really easy it is to do the installation. But if we're looking for broad, you know, high impact diesel reduction, we need to be looking at these larger scale projects, which unfortunately due to, and as Clarence has mentioned, really is almost nearly impossible in Nunavut currently. And there's so many good examples across, you know, our Arctic and into Alaska of how this is workable. But the rates currently are not substantive enough to allow these projects to go forward. That's the thing I have right now, David.
Thanks, Eryn. Thanks for sticking with us. I have this experience almost every day in Cambridge Bay. So that concludes the 6 presentations that were planned as part of the webinar. And again, I'll just remind everyone, please feel free to enter any questions or comments you have into the chat, and we'll begin to work our way through those now. There's a couple that have come in over the last half hour, and maybe we'll start with these. And the first one, Clarence, is directed at you specifically, but others I think have touched on this over the last in their presentations as well. But you mentioned community solar, and there was a question of whether if you could perhaps expand a little bit on NCC's involvement in community solar and utility scale projects in Nunavut. And others might have examples as well of the scalability of solar as one of the alternative types of energy generation.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so I'll just expand on that a little bit. So as part of our ownership group, we have one of our shareholders is Qiqavik Corporation, and they're the regional development corporation for the Qiqavik region for the 13 communities. And a number of years ago, they started up a new company called Nunavut Nukusattik Corporation, NNC, and they've really been taking the lead and the charge. So directly, NCC is not involved on these, more of our shareholder, but where we play a part in this, I guess, is assisting our sister company with any of the work that they need, especially when it comes to execution. And one project that we're just finishing up right now and has become quite challenging for us, not so much a community project, but it certainly has been a big one. It's a deep energy upgrade on a existing facility in Iqaluit, and the building has a significant amount of solar on it. We did upgrades with the windows, the insulation package on the walls, roof, and floors. But, you know, we had planned on going behind the meter on this. You know, we haven't been able, again, because of the issues that we have within the policies that are written or that we're governed by. And when you think that it's a public utility that's, you know, basically writing these policies, it's created a distinct challenge for us. And just with this project alone, some of the bigger community projects that have been planned, such as in Senekilowik or in Arviat, it's the policies that's blocking it. And, you know, again, as I had mentioned, I had joined the board of directors at QEC, and, you know, one of the committees I joined on our board as well is the Alternative Energy Committee, with the sole purpose of just trying to make that change, and no personal interest in it other than, you know, again, it's sad when the technologies are there and the willingness are there with different partners, but then we have policies that are there blocking us from moving forward. So I think it's something that on community solar projects, I'll be able to talk more on, you know, a little more down the road, but that's kind of where it is right now. Thank you, Mr. Hook.
Thanks, Clarence. I just want to point out that there's lots of links that are being contributed to the chat as well. And I think we'll be able to compile those if you're not able to see those or get to all of them right away. Mads, you have your hand up. I'll turn it over to you right now.
Yeah, it's just because while, and thank you, David, it is two comments, and one of them I think is just worth mentioning, because while we are having this webinar right now, all the electricity was cut off to the capital of Greenland because of bad weather. So right now you have 18,000 people without any electricity in Greenland in November, which is pretty bad also during a pandemic. So they have emergency generators, but this is, I mean, I just want to say the challenges we are facing is not only in remote communities. I mean, these are in bigger areas. So I thought that was an interesting fact, and it will be interesting to see when they will get it up and running again, the electricity. And secondly, I just want to applaud what Eryn was saying. I really think that is a capacity, skills, and competencies is a thing that everyone miss when they talk about this. You know, it's very easy for people sitting in Oslo or Moscow or Copenhagen or Washington to speak about the energy transition and so on, but we really need to upgrade the skills and competences, both for the people living in the remote communities, but it's also around running projects. It's about applying for funding. It's about, you know, it's the whole spectrum of energy from the project starts to the project finish. And it's also in largest communities. So recently Norway just announced the how the population has been growing in the past year. And throughout Norway, the population has been growing, except in the two most northern regions. In northern Sweden, they have the same issues, that people are leaving the region, so it's hard to find people to actually work there. And I really think we have to provide energy to people for them to stay. So skills and competence is also about, having skills and competence to run renewable energy projects, but it's also just, needed for people to stay there and make a living. We need this energy transition. So I just want to say, skills and competences is a whole issue in itself, but it's the most important issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Tonje.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to what Mats said about that we need to ensure that people stay in the Arctic, and that we need these energy industries in order to have working places there. But I just want to remind everyone that the current industry policies that the Nordic countries are doing in our land areas are actually forcing us out of our land areas. They are forcing us out of our work. So just to remind everyone that there are already sustainable green working places in the Arctic that needs to be ensured that they can continue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at the other questions that have come in. There's one question about, this is directed, I think, well, at you, Mads, but perhaps others might have a perspective on this. And whether projects such as the emerging Polar Silk Road and the huge investments by Russia and China and other states in things like LNG pipelines are damaging to the various efforts to look at options for sustainable renewable energy in the Arctic, or can these two things exist alongside each other, LNG and renewables?
Thank you for that. I think there's two answers to this. So one is that we need an energy transition. I think everyone agrees on this. And this energy transition has to happen sooner than later. And LNG is one bridge for this. So when you look at shipping, for example, LNG emits much less than diesel would do before we get to power to X and ammonia, methanol. So LNG has a key role to play there. Another key role is also, like as I mentioned in earlier, that companies, when they come in, they often come in with, they build schools, they build roads, they build hospitals for the local communities, and they also build renewable energy projects as well along the Northern Sea route. So Novatec, Rosatom are both involved in renewable energy projects, and when I speak with them, and they also say, there's a push from their customers that they need to be, the energy production has to be more renewable. I think for some people on this panel, it might be paradoxical that in Norway, for example, Equinor, that's doing oil drilling, is working a lot within renewable energy as well, and see how can they introduce more renewable energy on their offshore platforms as well. So I don't see them as opposite, the LNG, and I don't see the huge investments in Russia and China. Actually, I think we need energy from the Arctic, and that's another important point, is that we are 4 million people in the Arctic, living in an area bigger than the continent of Africa. And us 4 million people, we cannot use all that energy ourselves, but there's definitely a lot more people that can use it. I mean, in 2050, we'll be 9.7 billion people on this planet, and we need to provide energy to the outside of the Arctic as well to make sure we deal with this climate crisis. So I definitely see a role for China there, for example, to have energy from the Arctic in one form or another. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'm going to turn to another question, and this is one that I think is certainly on my mind from time to time, is the sort of guidance that we can provide to small energy solution providers, so primarily solar and wind, perhaps geothermal as well, who are keen to partner with local communities in the north and embark on some clean energy projects. advice might panelists have for those smaller companies and in terms of how they could partner with communities or with other organizations in the North working on these projects? Eryn.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. I think one of the things that we strongly encourage communities to do is to always review multiple parties and look at the offerings, whether that be through a request for proposal, wanting to work more in the North. The best way to do that is by getting involved and offering supports in different ways, whether that be through mentorship or advice, or I know David had mentioned our podcasts and online webinars. About building those relationships yourself. And I think the best way to do that is through networking.
Thanks, Eryn. And Tonje, you have your hand up as well.
Thank you. In the risk of repeating myself, I just always when small businesses, or it doesn't matter, small or big businesses who are going to operate in the Arctic where there are indigenous peoples, they need to be respectful and actually enforcing the free, prior, and informed consent principle properly. That also is respecting consent. I would also, what I find is very troubling actually in my own community is that energy companies, particularly wind energy companies, are coming into our communities and quite deceitful in how they present their projects. We experience that they are more not there to talk to us and to come to an agreement, but more there to get our consent on a not very honest way. We have many or several examples of them trying to buy herders by offering them millions of Norwegian kroners without actually it being, from a legal standpoint, possible to buy someone's rights to grazing lands. And this is also creating a lot of, or potentially can create conflict within our communities, where some are taking these, these bids to trying to buy them off. And yeah, just in general, I think that the small or large scale companies need to be respectful of the people living there, not doing this deceitful behavior that we experience, because that is very damaging for our own community, but also damaging for the energy industry. Actually, it's because we don't have any trust in energy companies anymore. So if there are actually coming energy companies that are sincerely do have the concerns of the Arctic communities in their mind, I'm sorry to say, but they are in a they do have some colleagues that are not operating in the proper way, and that leaves us to don't have any trust in them. So yeah, more FPIC, more honesty, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, and I think there's been a number of there's been a couple of comments anyway about here, perhaps of a conversation we could have in the time that remains, but also perhaps in future discussions about this whole process of self-determination, respecting community and indigenous rights holders in areas where renewable energy is being developed. And again, this is going to vary from place to place. And Guðmundur, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the experience that you've had with this in Grímsey and in Iceland.
The situation in is there anything particular? Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, just how communities have ensured that their perspectives, their concerns about some of these developments have have been respected as you go forward, the process of consultation and their involvement, rather than it being pushed from an external or an outside perspective.
I guess I'm not the best person to talk about that. There are other people in the area working more closely with people living there. But I would say, just to be honest, I've been a bit surprised how the people living in Grímsey are. Of course, they're excited about this energy transition and the projects that we're working on, but they have not been pushing themselves for these solutions, for energy transition on the ferry, energy transition in the heating. Of course, they've looked into geothermal, and the agencies in Iceland, they have checked the geothermal possibilities in around Grímsey. But of course, there are so few houses, so the district heating system is way too expensive to drill for geothermal water in the area, as it would never, it's never economically viable. So we will always look for other options, heat pumps and things like that. But that's my response, if that tells you anything. But I'm a bit surprised how little involvement the people in the island have in all this going away from oil.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Is there anyone else from the panel that would like to comment on this question? And jump in, because I can't see all of the hands at once. And are there any questions that panelists would like to ask of each other? Often in these panels, it's a chance to have a little bit of a dialogue among yourselves is useful as well. So I'll just ask if anyone wants to jump in with a question for someone else on the panel. So I guess I'm curious how both from a technology perspective and also from a policy perspective, the idea of sort of smart grids that can incorporate inputs from different types of generating capacity of renewable energy, given that it's unlikely that there's a single type of infrastructure, whether it's solar or wind or geothermal or biofuels, that could completely substitute or fulfill the needs in any community. How much work has been done in looking at how we have some redundancy in power generating capability? The blackout in Greenland, points very clearly to the need for there to be not single solutions in place in any one situation, but the opportunity to make sure there's backup and redundancy and some of the efficiencies that can be achieved by doing that. Matt?
Yeah, I want to give two examples. So one is in Greenland right now. That is actually so just for everyone who doesn't know, Greenland that I've been working with for many years is more than 90% indigenous land. The whole government is indigenous, and they're very, very pro wind turbines and hydro and everything energy development, and they are currently looking at the smart grid in the capital of Nuuk. And it's for several reasons. First of all, it's because they see an increasing electrification of the city, so they expect more people to drive electric vehicles and so on. But right now, the hydro power plant is simply not big enough for the urbanization that they're facing. The challenge here is, again, where I started, is the investments. You know, when you have an economy and you have to prioritize between, you know, the fishing or the mining or whatever, you know, it's difficult to prioritize a smart grid. One company that is doing that, though, is Tromskraft in northern Norway. So they have a project called Smart Senja, where they're saying, how can we do more with less? And how can we use both to guide our company, but also to guide the citizens around the community? So basically what they are trying to do is to develop this smart grid. And they're saying, you know, yeah, first of all, the energy is cheaper, but it's also a better use of the energy if you know, wash your dishes during the night when the energy is lower, or, you know, you turn off the heated floors whenever you're not using them, and so on. So they're trying to develop a system that both reminds, you know, big organizations and schools and so on in the community, but also, you know, private citizens about how better to use the energy. Because, as I said, you know, with a growing population, we need to do the same, if not more, with less resources, because we should invest in energy efficiency, and we should invest in smart grids and smart nets. Again, where's the scale? And also, if we do that, then we also need investments in connectivity, as we heard with Eryn's connection earlier, that goes from across the Arctic region. There needs to be more investments in digitalization. So, you know, the question is where to start. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have time for one last question, and I'll take your question, Jasmine, which is, how has COVID changed the view of renewable energy for remote communities, if at all? Are there any lessons from the pandemic over the last couple of years that are relevant to how we think about renewable energy? And Eryn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I mentioned in my opening remarks the Indigenous Off-Diesel initiative, where 15 communities are doing their energy plans and their projects. And a lot of them are working with a number of partners as well that they've developed and they've led. You know, one of the biggest, if not the biggest challenge that we've seen is community engagement and education, and how difficult that is to do in a COVID environment, as well as the costs of projects. If you're bringing in people from otherwise, or trying to train people on the ground, the difficulty of doing that during COVID. We've seen that the projects that we're working
we're having trouble with your connection again, Eryn. Try turning your camera off.
All right. Okay, let me try this again. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think this is going to work very well.
I said that the two biggest challenges with COVID.
No, you're cutting out, Eryn. I think in the interest of time, maybe I'll just ask Jennifer if she has any final sort of comments on this question. Sorry about that, but we're just not hearing you right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I really wanted to hear Eryn's answer too. So maybe Eryn, you could write something in the chat. Well, I think what Eryn was going to talk about, I think, is incredibly important, and I know that I heard some of the information about the situation in Old Crow and how it delayed their energy project, but I don't know it as intimately as Eryn does. So what I was going to speak about was that the Arctic Council did some work on very early on during the pandemic to try and understand the unique Arctic context. And what it strikes me as interesting about what we sort of the messages we received from that analysis that was done in June of 2020 was that actually in some ways COVID helped the non-Arctic of understand some of the fundamental infrastructure challenges that the Arctic faces. So not that it just really highlighted it in a way that people could understand it differently. So the infrastructure challenges around energy, around water, around connectivity, another good example from this, have been there, and Northerners have been speaking about these for some time, and the importance of addressing these and how critical they are to the success and thrivability of communities, but the stories that communities were able to tell because of COVID actually illustrated that in a way that others could understand. So I actually think there's in some ways an opportunity here for policymakers to better understand the importance of infrastructure like energy infrastructure in that context. So not to suggest that COVID in any way has been a positive, but I think there are opportunities from the pandemic for Northern communities to really shift the conversation around infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jennifer. And Eryn, we'll capture your specific comments in some other way as well. But I agree that the last couple of years has created an opportunity for conversations that wouldn't have taken place otherwise. So I think we're really at the end. I'd like to thank all of the panelists again for their presentations and contributions to this discussion. It's pretty interesting, and I think sets the stage for the next webinars over the coming months. But I'd like to turn it now to Joanna to wrap everything up. Joanna.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network and of course WIRE International in cooperation with the Icelandic Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the Embassy of Canada to Iceland, the Embassy of Iceland to Canada, the Northeast Iceland Regional Development Agency, SSNE Iceland, the Directorate of Equality in Iceland, and Electricity Human Resource Canada EHRC. Thank you to Her Excellency Ambassador Jeannette Menzies, our distinguished guests and panelists. We thank you for your valuable time and for this important discussion, and we look forward to series number 2. Thank you again, and wishing everyone a lovely day and evening.